Welcome to the Level Up with Josh Pratt podcast, where you're invited to learn from my remarkable guest and lead a purpose-driven life. Hey, everybody. Welcome to Level Up with Josh Pratt. I've got my awesome good friend Kyle Burns here on the show with us today. Kyle, welcome. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, man. Doing
Good.
doing real great. It's funny to hear you talking to a crowd, but I know it's just you and me on here.
Kyle, we've got thousands of people listening right now. So wait,
I
hold on.
can't,
We've just eclipsed 10,000 people listening right now.
can't wait to hear all the comments and feedback on our conversation.
Yes, and I got to start with this. A core memory that I have with Kyle here, my very first memory. Actually, I don't even remember meeting Kyle in this moment, but what I do remember, and Kyle knows this story. This was probably like 1985. We were just little tykes at the time, but I moved into our new home. We just pulled in the driveway. I didn't even go into our house. I ran across the street barefoot and I knocked on his door. I talked to his lovely mom, Jan, and I said, "Do you have anyone here my age that I can play with?" Like, I have a pretty lousy memory, but I do remember that. Do you remember us actually meeting in that moment?
Yeah, I do not.
Yeah. The rest is history, though. So, um, how about this? I'm going to just share a brief little bio about you, Kyle, if that's all right.
Do you have one?
Oh, I've got it all right here. I don't
Uh,
even need anything written out. So,
All right. Yeah, go
and then
for it.
you can correct me where I need correcting. All right, so Kyle Burns. I won't give all your birth date and bank info and all that stuff, social. But Kyle Burns is a stud. He went to Gonzaga High School, and then after that, he went to Elon, and Elon is in North Carolina.
Yeah.
And what did you study there?
Business, marketing, and economics.
Okay, look at this. He's just a scholar and a gentleman.
So like the most general business degree you can get because I knew going into college that I was getting into real estate. So
You
uh,
knew that you were going to get in and you'd figure it out once you got out.
yeah, that was it.
That was like me at BYU. I was like, I don't really care what major I get into. I'm just going to get in and get out. But I'm not done talking about you. All right. So Kyle married a beautiful gal by the name of Brittany Mace. She's now Brittany Burns, and they got 4 kiddos, 3 girls, 1 little boy, and poor Jack.
I
No.
know the Little Prince.
Yeah. And yeah, so Kyle's right. He's in real estate, he's in development. He and his family reside in Virginia. And without further ado, Kyle, let's just kind of dive into it and maybe pick us, share with our audience a little bit about, where your story was headed, maybe through college and then after, and how you got to where you are, about 20 years later.
Yeah, man, that's a lot's happened in that time frame. All right, let's see. So college was standard college experience. I kind of knew, yeah, I had a lot of family in real estate, so I kind of knew the trajectory I was on coming out of school. I had, cousins and uncles and everybody that was doing, commercial real estate up in the DC area, and I had been interning with a real estate firm up there, so I kind of knew that that was the the path I was headed, that I wanted to into that somehow. Little did I know that I would end up in the development world when I started, but that's kind of fast forwarding. So graduated from Elon, made it out in 4 years, surprisingly.
Hallelujah.
Yeah, I think my parents were happy about that one. Yeah, and immediately got into real estate. I was living in Northern Virginia, working at a Reston Town Center, doing commercial real estate, office sales and leasing. It was it was an interesting avenue for me. I mean, that's kind of what I'd been raised around, grew up around. That's what I knew, but it wasn't until much later after moving to Richmond that I really found out how vast the real estate world is and how many different facets of it there are.
Oh yeah.
And residential, I like, just barely knew anything about residential development or sales for that matter, out of college, and was just kind of in my little tunnel vision, doing commercial real estate, living every 22-year-old's dream, maybe, or at the time,
Yeah,
what
yeah.
they would,
Yeah, with
what
that,
they would imagine their dream would be.
yeah, what did that look like? If you don't mind kind of exploring that with our audience a little bit more.
Yeah, so it was, I was just single, running around Bethesda, Arlington, downtown DC, just
So
making
when
a little bit of money and, not really have a whole lot of direction, not a whole lot of grounding, if you will, or foundation kind of keeping me focused. So I think, there was a lot of misalignment in my morals, or at least just misalignment in the values that I had and what I was chasing at the time. And that kind of, matured over time. And I kind of found my way out of that through several experiences.
how
Not
long
so
did that
pleasant.
take? Maybe if you would just like show us a little bit more like what that looked like. Your average is 22-year-old, you're sowing your wild oats all
Yeah, I mean, yeah,
town.
that's it. Drinking a lot, going out to bars Wednesday through Saturday night, right? That was it. It was like Thursday and Friday, you kind of just plugging along work wise, but it was really waiting for that 5 o'clock business happy hour and kick that into the evening. And,
Yeah.
looking back, I probably put a lot more focus on that than maybe it, really was. But I think that was such a big part of my trying to find my identity. Yeah. And I think that was, so much of that I was trying to find in a superficial world in superficial relationships maybe. And I had a lot of good core relationships, a lot of guys that were, really good dudes and really good friends. But
Time out
yeah,
real quick. When you say like really good dudes, were they really good for you in that moment? Like, or were they legit? Like they're there for you if you're going through something? Like, I guess my question is like,
a little bit
how
of
good
both.
of friends were they really?
Yeah, I mean, a little bit of both. The guys that I still talk to, I'd kind of known, growing up. But then there were, I mean, countless relationships where they were just business focused, or focused around the social aspects. That's how we knew each other. We were in the same circles, kind of running around. So, yeah, I mean, a lot of guys that I was hanging with at the time were probably, I would say close friends, but those were the guys I was living with and who I would consider close. But as we, grew and started looking for different things in life, it kind of, we grew apart. And I mean, I moved. Part of it was moving hours away. So
Was that move, was it spurred by those relationships where you're like, hey, I need to get out of here. I need to change of pace? Do you feel like God was kind of maybe directly or indirectly, you feel like he was just kind of leading your path, or what was that?
yeah, 100%. I don't think I was running. Maybe I was running away from something a little bit, but running towards something as well. And so, that was my late 20s. I was kind of coming out of that, spending a little bit more time focusing on who I was, what I was really trying to achieve in life, and that, was perfect circumstance right at that time. I was trying to find faith and find a foundation that I didn't really know. And going through some challenges that had kind of come up in my mid 20s, coming out of that, looking for faith and trying to find purpose. God opened the door, introduced me to my wife, and there, it was one of those moments where you just know
Pretty pretty. Yeah, one thing
divine
Kyle and I
intervention.
we have in common, you and I have in common, is we both married up well beyond our
Oh yeah,
bachelor. So
completely outkicked my coverage on that one.
yeah,
And but I think what's so great about that for me is that I realized that was my first real, I'd say, like, notion that God was intervening and kind of giving me a signal of like, hey, you're on the right track here, keep going. And that just led me into going much deeper.
yeah, I mean, I think one thing I'd mention right now is like for those of you that are kind of wondering maybe like who Kyle was, is this 20, 21, 22 year old. Kyle would write me while I was on my mission. I remember some of the emails we'd swap back and forth, and you were complimentary of like who I was and who you were hearing me become. But
Yeah.
the same was true with you. Kyle, as a 21, 22 year old, sure, you might have been partying here and there like a very normal 22-year-old male, or maybe even like um, partying excessively like a
Yeah.
normal 22-year-old male. But I mean, you always had that foundation that you kind of got taught as a kid, that your parents taught you, hey, we do good unto others, we love our neighbors, we serve our, community, and so on and so forth. So I think like it was just like kind of this trajectory that's taking you up and up and up. And
Yeah.
then again, you were talking about your late 20s. You and I remember chatted regularly, during that period. And I remember one thing that I benefited from one of our conversations was right before my brother Sean had passed away. I
Yeah.
told you maybe like 24 hours before he passed away, I said, hey, if I were to get a phone call saying that Sean passed away, because my brother was battling alcoholism pretty severely at the time, I said, the Lord knows him. He knows his heart. And so we were kind of on a similar track in the sense that you and I are having these gospel centered conversations, if you want to call them that, or conversations about God and faith. And then we both kind of got put on the new track, this higher plane, which was meeting our spouse. So
Yeah.
segue to that, how did you meet Brittany, and tell us a little bit about your guys' story?
Yeah. So we met in Tappahannock, Virginia. Our families have river houses right next to each other. And the funny thing there is we grew up there our entire lives. I mean, I was going there since, my parents were going there since I was born. We knew it as Benny's place. And Brittany and her family, her grandparents owned the house 2 houses down. So we didn't meet until I was 27,
Yeah. How does that happen?
2012. It was just, it almost, again, it was a God thing where he didn't want me to meet Brittany at an earlier time. It probably wouldn't have
Because
worked
you
out this way.
ran for the hills.
Yeah, I definitely don't think I was at the right maturity level. She is wise beyond her years, but yeah, I knew her brothers, I knew her family, and had kind of started hanging out with them a little bit when we were down there. And it was just, there's a little bit of an age gap, 4 years between Brittany and I, and so it just worked out that when she was graduating college, she was spending her summers at the Currituck Club in the Outer Banks, and that was when my family really started to go down to the river. And I guess about 2 years after she had graduated college, maybe a year after, she started coming to the river more, and that was right. Then we met, and the rest is history. Now I live in Richmond, Virginia, with 4 kids, and uh,
Going
having
big. Level
totally different, having totally different life than I thought I would, but I wouldn't trade it for the world.
Okay, we talk about leveling up. We definitely leveled up when we met our wives and got
Yeah,
married.
I remember going through it, and I remember you and I were close. We had gotten a lot closer that time um, in our lives, I guess, because
That's because you put your hooligan lifestyle behind you.
yeah,
And
I remember just having conversations with you about the just how vital it is to have relationships with friends, girlfriends, whoever, people that are building you up, that are making you a better person, surrounding yourself with those kind of people. And that played such a pivotal role for me at that time. Growing up, like in just the season of life I was in, growing spiritually, growing professionally, growing intimately in friendships and relationships, and just how much those conversations with you and that realization of like, hey, we are the people that are influencing us the most, and we need to go make sure that those networks and those circles are the ones that are forcing you or encouraging you to be the best version of yourself.
totally. And I think it's been said that basically you are the person that spend, the 5 people you spend the most time with, right?
Yeah,
You
that's
kind
it.
of some of them. And I think on that note, I think it's we talked about this the other night a little bit. It's just like who's there with you when you're in your Gethsemane, if you're a Christian, you kind of get that reference, or in your purifying moments, right?
Yeah.
uh you kind of just discuss that, like, hey, if someone was a true friend to me during my mid 20s, they're probably not offering me a drink, or they're probably not saying, hey, let's go hit up this party, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
um
I mean, the ones that have kept in touch with me, certainly, um, they know that that's just not my lifestyle anymore. And I made choices to be a better version of myself. A lot of it was for growth, but really I think that the biggest pivot for me was kids. Trying to give them an environment where it's hard. We're not perfect. You know, we're not made that way, and nobody is. But you're always trying to be better. And so for me, alcohol was something that was fun. I was social. I was able to make friends with a lot of people easily. But I would say 10 to 20% of the time or more, really, it wasn't making me a better person. And my kids deserve the best version of me that I can produce. And so that was one area where I just knew, hey, if this is not making you a better person, if this is not making you better at your job, you know, if it's not providing deeper connection with people or relationships or bringing you closer to God, why is it such an important part of your life? And
totally.
um, yeah, so for me, it was an easy, okay, my kids deserve better than what I can give them if I'm out, doing happy hours Thursday through Saturday, or, just, you find that you have to eliminate the things that you can, right? There are built-in vices that we all have. Patience is probably one of my Achilles heels. I'm just not a very patient person, but I'm even less
Just for
patient when
kids.
I'm drinking. So
That's a great point. But you said, like, when your kids came along, you kind of had to like make this decision that you were going to level up, and you've done that, and kudos to you, because there's a lot of people out there that want to do that but have just not been able to for whatever reason. So my question to you is,
yeah,
what what do you say to these people that are like have this stumbling block, if you will, right? Like they keep stumbling over this obsession, whether it's alcohol or whether it's gambling, or maybe it's not even like a super duper serious vice, if you will, or sin, but it's maybe it's their pride. Like, for you, what would you say? All right, you're
uh,
stumbling over this. How do you get over that hurdle?
yeah. So man, there's so much meat on this bone that we could chew. I think so much of our culture is is kind of a showmanship culture, right? What kind of car do you drive? Where do you live? What kind of house do you have? And I think you're always going to be wanting living in that environment. So that the real, the challenge I would put, or I think the thing that's most important, and I know that you share this, this value with me, is just faith in a higher power, faith in God that, we were wired a certain way, that there is our souls, our hearts, whatever you want to call it, are longing for a deeper connection or fulfillment in something. Well, I believe we were designed that the only thing that can fulfill that void is a relationship with God. So I think a lot of the world is trying to fill it through, whether it's drugs or material things or gambling, like you say, or just, buying the latest iPhone or having the coolest technology.
Your iPhone just go berserk? I just got
yeah.
the national alert too. So there you go, latest
Uh,
iPhone. If you get the
right.
latest iPhone, here's your commercial that you can get the national alert.
But I think that's it. For me, it was realizing that, that I was looking for something somewhere it was never going to be found, and it was never going to satisfy me. It was never going to give me the confidence, the stability, the foundation I was looking for. and I think for so many people out there, if they're struggling with that, it's, find your truth, find the truth that's out there that you can ground in, and don't look for it in a secular world where people are constantly vying for your attention or vying for your like button click, or whatever it might be. So for me, that's, it was faith. It was, believing that there's a higher purpose for why we're here, for existence. And when I ground myself in that, everything else, becomes trivial.
Yeah.
And
No, you
that's,
said it.
that was, something that, I never did the AA or went down that like support group path. And that works for a lot of people. And I think, you know, kudos to them if they're doing that and that works for them.
Yeah,
For
let's
me,
if
that
I
was,
if I can sorry, if you
yeah,
for
yeah, no, go ahead. What do you got?
no, you finish your thought. I'm sorry I interrupted.
Well, I was just saying, like for me, that was pointing my focus on, if I were to do that, if I needed that support group to, combat alcoholism or, whatever I was struggling with, it seemed to me, and at least for my personality, kind of kept that up front versus putting something else in that place. You know, somebody once told me, make sure you're running towards something and not away from something. You're going to be more successful, whether, and that was a career related move, but he just said, hey, don't run away from something that's uncomfortable. Run towards something that you are excited about, that you're going to be more successful in that. And, as I relate that to the things that excite me on a personal level, that was kind of it, right? I didn't want to get bogged down on where I was struggling. I wanted to get focused on where the truth was, and what path can I be on where that's my primary focus, not the things I'm struggling with, but kind
Yeah.
of the things that dilute that struggle entirely and make it a non-thought for me.
Yeah, like a lot of things you said there. When you were talking about showmanship, one of my favorite quotes is by Theodore Roosevelt, and he says that comparison is the thief to joy.
Yeah.
I mean, when somebody gets to go on some marvelous trip or they get a new car, like, I mean, you fill in the blank, whatever it is. I'm like happy for him. Like, hey, that's awesome that you got like this trip. I'm so glad you guys were able to go and experience this. Like, but when I'm comparing, if either from like a lower end, if you want to call it that, then you'll never be happy with what you have. Like, oh, my neighbors, they just got a new car, my poor life. But then on the flip side, you can be the one with a new car. And if you're busy comparing yourself to your neighbor that has the 2002 Chevy Malibu that's beat up, I once had one of those. Then you're not in that moment. You're so
Yeah.
focused on being better than somebody else. So
Yeah. Somebody told me that quote rather recently. I just finished doing the Blue Ridge Ironman 70.3, and we were reminiscing. I was talking. He was a guy that was kind of coaching me through how to train for it, and I got out there, and that thing just kicked my butt, man. The swim was brutal. The bike took forever, and by the time I got to the run, I was just shuffling my way through it. But I finished, right. Like that was the goal for me, was just get through this thing. It might take you 6 or 7 hours, but do it. We were talking afterwards, and I had seen someone I knew through real estate and business in Richmond. He was doing it, and he just crushed it. And I remember talking to this guy. I was like, man, yeah, but that guy, he crushed it. And he said to me, he said, don't, comparison is the thief of joy. Don't let that dilute the accomplishment you made, because everyone's lives are different. Everyone has different thresholds, different foundations, and different accomplishments. Like I used to say, that guy wasn't training for years,
yeah.
and I'd only decided and gotten into training for this thing 6 months before.
Yeah, we actually just spoke about that in church, not last Sunday, but the Sunday before. We were just talking about that. And you can go into the gym. I don't go to the gym, but you could go into the gym in theory. And
We used to run together. You remember that?
yeah, those were awful days.
Uh,
Just kidding. But you can go into the gym and you see someone doing like crazy weight, but like they're at a different part of their workout, right? Like they're not just getting started, they're well into their workout, whereas somebody else might just be in their warm up. Another thing you like, another thing you had said that I liked was, you said like they have to find their truth. Like for some people, their truth isn't going to be God, right? Like their
Yeah.
truth in that juncture of their life might be connecting with a best buddy that they've known for eons, or opening up to a sibling, or asking for help from a therapist, right? Like
Yeah.
those can be true principles, right? Truth is truth wherever it is. And then the last thing I wanted to comment on that you said was, instead of running away from something, running to something. It reminded me of this talk I once heard, and this guy's just saying, look, like, you don't always need to be playing defense in life. Like, go on the offense and chase after what you want, essentially. And instead of always having to be like reactive, I guess, opposed to being proactive.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Another thing you had mentioned, you said kids, they were a game changer for you. And anyone that's a true parent, is going to agree with you 100%. One
Yeah.
thing that Jim Gaffigan says, I think he has like 5 kids or something. And he's like, somebody asked him, like, why do you have so many kids? And he's like, well, like with each kid, I just feel like I become a little bit less selfish. And then he jokes around. He's like, I figure if I have like 20 more kids, I should be a pretty decent guy. So
Yeah, man.
I'm right there with you.
Um, Dude, I think I was always, I always wanted to have kids. And then you and I started competing on who could have more. But no, but
Five
when,
versus four, Team Pratt.
um,
A competition. We're not comparing. Trying
man,
to do
true,
great
so true.
things.
Um, so I remember like it was yesterday. My 6 year old was our first child. When she was born, and anyone that's a parent knows this, it's the craziest experience that you meet someone for the first time that you've known your whole life, and it's so hard to describe. But like that first moment when you see your child, you've known them forever. You've known them for their whole lives, but it feels like your life before that child, like just it is a distant memory now. If it just for me, it was always like she's always been there. Um, it was the purest form of love that I think humans have the ability to create. And so, like we were sitting there not long after. Let's do that again and again, as many times as we can recreate this purity of relationship of love at its core. Let's do that. And
Yeah.
yeah,
Tiffany and
6 years
I,
and 4 kids later, here we are.
hey, bravo. Bravo. Way to go, Brittany, really.
Yeah, so true.
On the joke of labor and delivery, somebody, what am I trying to say? Basically, like during pregnancy, the husband's like right there, like, go, babe, you're doing great, And then I kidded around with someone's like, yeah, it was a lot of tough. It was tough. I had to stand the whole time. That's a joke. Don't tell your wife that. She'll probably hate you for that one.
Well, it's your podcast,
Yeah.
so
I'm gonna edit that part out. Okay, so we're on the topic of kids. What do you say to someone that's maybe it's a young newlywed couple and they are pretty convinced that they'll be just fine without kids? You're clearly a proponent of fatherhood and parenting. So what do
yeah,
you say to them?
it's it is the hardest, greatest thing you'll ever do. Um, I don't. Oh, this is so hard because I don't want to like insult or offend anybody that truly doesn't want to have kids, but you'll never know what you're missing. It is challenging in a lot of ways, but it's the most rewarding thing you'll ever do, and it's worth it. You're going to have hard times. I don't think any of us are protected from that in life. And it, heaven forbid anything happens to your kids, but the few moments or many moments that you have with them, they're just, it's, it is it's unmatched in any other relationship, any other experience. And so I think there's a lot of folks that maybe don't want to. Yeah, there's a lot of reasons that a lot of people don't want to have kids. Health related could be some, or just lifestyle. They don't want to disrupt their lifestyle and or the amount of money they make and where their socioeconomic status is. And you start having kids, and that can change very fast. Um, and I think each person is different. I truly believe that it is the greatest experience that you'll ever have, having kids and having that responsibility to bring humans into this world and raise them. And I believe we're called to do that. I think to the extent that we can raise our kids right and send them out as lights in the world, that's what we are called to do.
I'm just laughing because I'm sure there's gonna be people watching there be like, I was not called to be that. But,
Maybe not, but you won't know until you have a kid, and then you realize, man, like that, it's just a game changer, and
you're right.
everything else, it puts everything else into perspective in a different way.
Totally. 110%. Here we are. I didn't think we were gonna be diving into the Bible, but here we go. So Meshach, Shadrach, and Abednego, like they're getting ready to be burned, at the stake, essentially for not worshiping these gods, right? These false
Yeah.
gods. But they say to these people that are trying to essentially murder them, they're like, hey, our God is powerful, he's mighty, he can save us, he will save us. But the next sentence he says, but if not, and I think that's a great message for all of us, even if you're a Bible believer or not. Like, but if not, that little phrase is like so powerful that, hey, God can't, if he didn't, I believe God can give me the best marriage, he can give me the greatest kids that are believers and followers. But if not, and then fill in the blank, like he'll take care of it in the end, essentially. And
Yeah,
it's everything, like you said, in perspective.
yeah. I mean, that reminds me of what we were talking about the other night, where like the consequence of not believing and being wrong is catastrophic versus the benefits of believing and abiding, or just trying to keep yourself accountable to be the best version, or to be a follower of Christ. If you go through life and you do that, and you kind of keep that foundation, the foundation principles, and it's not true, what's the worst thing that could happen? You had better relationships, you had a better marriage, you had were a better parent to your kids. Okay, sorry that nothing else worked out, maybe, but if you don't believe and it turns out that it is true, man, you're screwed. You're so screwed.
The fruit is too good to pass up, and I tell people all the time, I was like, I feel like our church is the best kept secret. And if people just give the gospel a chance, I don't even care what faith you come from, but if you live like you said, the common tenets of the faith, you're going to live a happier life. You're going to love your neighbor. You're going to serve in your community. You're going to have better relationships all the way around.
Yeah.
So yeah, 110%.
You're going to spend more time in your life on things that matter.
Yeah. Things that matter most, and not getting caught up in the thick of thin things. And I think that's kind of what you were saying earlier, right? Is like, don't get caught up in like the size of your house, the car you drive, the followers, the likes, the whatever. Like, do I expect this podcast to grow enormously? No. Like, if it can just help a few people, that's fine. Like, if it helps one person, if it doesn't help anyone, I've enjoyed talking with you,
We'll have one recorded conversation
Yes.
in our 39-year friendship,
That's right.
37-year friendship.
That's right. And as you're talking about parenting, it got me thinking about this quote from one of our church leaders. And he says, some of the greatest work you'll ever do is going to be within the walls of your own home.
Yeah.
And the way you just hit the nail on the head when it comes to parenting. You're like, it's just unmatched. There's frustrating moments, there's long days, no doubt, but like, name me a profession or any type of work that is satisfying and rewarding that doesn't have tough moments, right?
Yeah. Absolutely. And if you're waiting for the time if you're waiting for the perfect time to do that, to start a family and have kids, it's right now. Wherever you are in life, it's right now. You're never going to be ready to have kids. You're never going to be ready to have multiple kids, but you know, God's not going to give you more than you can handle. And honestly, and I think in our culture, that's like inherently ingrained into every human, because listen, like, it's harder to adopt a dog than it is to have a child. You've got mountains of paperwork, and they come do a home visit. Nobody came to my house when we had our first kid and was like, this is suitable for a child. They just know that you're just created to do whatever you possibly have to do to keep this human alive. And so we know that, like, yep, check the box, you can leave the hospital after 2 days. But I want to go adopt a dog. I need like a full top secret security clearance.
Tell us all about your family. Tell us what the
is. What kind of yard does this dog have to run in? Like, none of that matters. When you're having kids, they know that you are going to rise to the occasion of being a parent and take care of that child. And so I encourage anybody that's, trying to plan and like, oh, we want to do these things. You never know. It wasn't easy for us to have kids. We tried to time it, and God just kind of chuckled and said, I'll show you when you're ready. And that's it. You just can't plan. For some people, it's really easy. For others, it could take a couple of years, and you're going to have hard times going through that.
One thing I wanted to mention, and I think you believe this, but you had said, God doesn't give us more than we can handle. I think sometimes he does, in the sense that like he wants us to turn to him, be like, I'm like, Heavenly Father, I can't do this. I cannot do this. I need some help.
Yeah.
I think you agree with that too. All right. So we've got about a minute left before we wrap this up. I want you to have the last word. What is something that you'd like to share? Maybe something that's on your heart that you'd like the audience to maybe take a little hidden gem away from?
Oh man, that's there's so many different topics we touched on. I think the biggest thing for anybody what I would say is believe in something bigger than yourself, and focus on your relationships, and your life is just going to be far more fruitful.
Thank you. That's sound.
Yeah, I just think that society is pulling you in a different direction, and if you can ground yourself in faith or belief of something bigger than you, man, the world's going to open up to you like never before.
Thank you. 100%. Appreciate it, Kyle. Want to thank Burns for hopping on the podcast, and I love you, brother. Appreciate you. And we'll have to have you on the podcast again soon. Yeah. Phase 2 or episode 2. You're going to be a regular contributor, so get ready. All right. I'll take it. Real quick, I want to say thank you for tuning in, and also ask for a favor. If you enjoyed the show, I'd ask that you would hit the subscribe button. It helps us scale the guests. It helps us grow the production. And if you really enjoyed it, please consider donating to the show by finding me on Venmo at Josh-Pratt. That's at JOSH-PRATT. I will repay your kind gesture by making sure that this show gets better and better. Thank you so much.